The night air over Red Hollow hung heavy with the scent of whiskey, sweat, and rain that hadn't yet fallen. The town's only saloon, the Golden Spur, glowed like a lantern in the dark, its swinging doors groaning as men came and went, boots thudding across the warped floorboards. Laughter burst from every corner, harsh and hollow, as a dozen rough voices filled the room. But beneath the noise, a piano played. The sound was soft at first, almost swallowed by the chaos. Then it rose, notes trembling, gentle, pure, a melody like moonlight falling on dust. Every man in that room could hear it, though few cared to listen. Behind the scratched mahogany counter, the barkeep grunted. "That blind girl's playin' again," he muttered, wiping his glass with a dirty rag. "Guess she never learns." At the far end of the saloon, in the corner beneath the cracked mirror, sat Alara Mayfield. Barely 20, her long dark hair spilled over her shoulders like ink. Her eyes, gray as morning fog, stared at nothing, fixed somewhere far beyond this world. Her fingers glided across the ivory keys, finding their way by memory and touch. The piano was an old thing, missing 2 hammers and slightly out of tune. Yet, in Alara's hands, it sounded alive, breathing, aching, hoping. A ranch hand slammed his empty mug down and shouted, "Play something cheerful, will ya? Ain't no one want to drink to funeral music." Laughter rippled across the room. Someone tossed a coin toward her. It clinked off the piano's edge and rolled to the floor. Alara didn't flinch. Her fingers never stopped moving. She kept her head bowed, face calm, as if she didn't hear the mockery that wrapped around her like smoke. When the song ended, silence followed for half a heartbeat. Then the noise returned, louder than before. "Guess the bird's gone quiet," someone jeered. Maybe she ran out of sad notes. Another snickered. Alara stood slowly, her hands trembling just a little. She reached for her cane, a smooth length of carved oak, worn by years of use, and tapped her way around the edge of the stage. The barkeep called out, "You levin' already, darlin'? Still got another hour left." Her voice was soft but steady. "The rain's comin'. I'd like to be home before it starts." A few men laughed again, but she didn't stay to hear them. The saloon doors creaked open, and she stepped into the chill of night. Outside, Red Hollow lay quiet under a sky thick with clouds. The lamps along the main street flickered in the wind. Horses shifted restlessly by the hitching posts, their saddles creaking like old bones. Alara tapped her cane lightly against the ground, feeling the rhythm of her own steps. She counted them, 23 to the water trough, 40 to the edge of the boardwalk, 60 before the path curved toward home. The dirt road stretched before her, invisible to her eyes but familiar beneath her boots. Each step sounded lonely. A whisper of voices drifted from a nearby porch. "There she goes again," one woman said. "Poor girl, all alone." "She's lucky folks still let her play," another muttered. "Ain't right, a blind girl sittin' in a saloon like that." Alara's jaw tightened. She had heard the same whispers every night, pity wrapped in poison. She never asked for charity, only to be heard. But in Red Hollow, kindness was as rare as rain in summer. By the time she reached the outskirts of town, the wind had picked up. Dust swirled around her skirts, and thunder growled far off in the hills. Her small cabin waited just beyond the river bend, a single window glowing faintly with the light she'd left burning. She stepped inside, closing the door behind her. The air smelled of old wood and lilac soap. On the table beside the bed lay a folded photograph, her father smiling, his hands resting on the same piano she now played. Alara traced the outline of his face with her fingertips. She could still hear his voice, warm and deep. "Music will always be your eyes, Alara. When the world turns cruel, let your fingers see for you." She smiled faintly. "I'm trying, Papa," she whispered. The sound of thunder grew nearer. She lit a lamp and sat by the window, listening to the rain begin its soft descent. Each drop tapping against the roof felt like a heartbeat, steady, constant, alive. But beneath that rhythm lay another, a restlessness she couldn't name. She felt it in her chest, in her fingertips, in the silence between songs. Something was coming. She didn't know what, only that the air felt heavier tonight, as if the world itself were holding its breath. Hours earlier, the road from the southern desert had been a storm of dust and lightning. A lone rider pushed through it, head bowed against the wind. His horse, dark as smoke, panted with exhaustion. The rider's duster coat was torn, his hat pulled low to hide his face. His name was Cole Avery, though no one in Red Hollow knew it yet. To the rest of the frontier, he was an outlaw. To himself, he was a man running from ghosts. By the time he reached town, the rain had just begun to fall. He tied his horse to a post outside the Golden Spur and looked up at the flickering lantern above the door. For a moment, he hesitated. Then he pushed the door open and stepped inside. The saloon quieted instantly. Every man turned to look. The newcomer's boots dripped with mud. His revolver gleamed at his hip, and a thin scar traced the line of his jaw. His eyes, steel blue, cold and sharp, swept the room once before settling on the piano in the corner. Elara was gone, but the faint scent of lilac still lingered there, mixed with the old wood and smoke. The barkeep cleared his throat. "Whiskey?" Cole nodded, tossing a coin on the counter. "Leave the bottle." He sat alone in the corner, back to the wall, eyes never still. To anyone watching, he looked like a man who trusted no one, and maybe he didn't. But then something caught his attention. On the piano surface lay a single coin, dull in the lamplight. It must have rolled there earlier, a mock offering from the drunks who'd laughed at the blind girl. Cole reached over and picked it up, turning it between his fingers. The edges were worn smooth, the metal warm from the fire's reflection. He set it back down gently. For reasons he couldn't explain, his chest ached. Outside, the rain thickened. He leaned back, closing his eyes, and for the first time in years, he felt the faint echo of peace, like the lingering memory of a song he'd almost forgotten. The next morning came gray and cold. Elara awoke to the sound of rain still whispering against her window. Her hands itched to play, to chase away the quiet, but she hesitated. Each night she played for people who didn't listen. Each morning she woke wondering why she tried again. She moved to the piano anyway. Her fingers hovered over the keys. The wood felt cool, smooth beneath her touch. She pressed one note, then another. The sound filled the cabin, soft as a prayer. When she finished, she sat in silence, head bowed. "Papa," she murmured, "sometimes I think the music's all I have left." But the truth she never said aloud was harder still. Sometimes she feared that even the music was slipping away, drowned out by the laughter of men who never saw her as more than a blind curiosity. She wrapped her shawl around her shoulders and turned her face toward the window. The storm was clearing now, the sky pale and new. Somewhere out there, she knew, people were waking to another day of the same cruel jokes, the same empty kindness, and yet a small, stubborn flame burned inside her, a hope she couldn't kill, because somewhere, deep down, she believed that one day someone would hear her music, not just the sound of it, but the heart inside it. Someone who wouldn't pity her or mock her, but see her. That night, she returned to the Golden Spur. The saloon was quieter than usual, the storm having kept most folk home. The fire crackled in the hearth, throwing golden light across the walls. As she sat down at the piano, her fingers hesitated. Something felt different. She started to play. The melody came slow and fragile, like a candle flickering in the wind. The few patrons left in the room turned their heads, drawn by the sadness in her song. Outside, footsteps approached, steady, heavy, sure. The door swung open. A gust of cold air swept in, carrying the scent of rain and dust. Elara didn't stop playing, though her heart stuttered at the sound. The footsteps crossed the room, boots echoing against the floorboards. The man, Cole, stood at the bar, dripping wet, his eyes drawn once again to the source of that sound. For a moment, everything in the saloon stilled. Even the fire seemed to hush, its crackle fading into silence. Elara's fingers trembled as she found the final notes. The last chord hung in the air, pure and haunting. Cole's breath caught. It was as if the whole world had fallen away, leaving only that sound, the blind girl's song, and the quiet between their heartbeats. The crowd, for once, said nothing. Cole took a slow step forward. Elara lifted her face, her blind eyes turning instinctively toward him. Though she could not see, she felt him there. Something about his presence pressed against her senses like the promise of a storm. For the first time that night, her lips curved into the faintest of smiles. And for the first time in years, Cole Avery felt something close to peace. The rain outside softened to a whisper. Two souls, both scarred by the world, stood in the same pool of light, one blind to sight, the other blind to grace. Neither spoke. They didn't have to. Fate had already begun its quiet song. The morning after the storm came bright and cruel. Sunlight poured through the cracks in the old saloon's shutters, spilling across empty tables and the sticky floorboards. The Golden Spur smelled of stale whiskey and smoke, the echoes of laughter still clinging to its corners like ghosts. Cole Avery sat alone at the bar, his hat tipped low, the brim shadowing the sharp lines of his face. His hands rested on the glass in front of him, fingers scarred, knuckles thick from too many fights. He had been awake all night, listening to the wind die down and to the faint memory of a piano melody that refused to leave his head. That sound, that voice without words, had cut through him like nothing else had in years. It had reached the part of him that still remembered being human. The barkeep, polishing a bottle, eyed him warily. "You're new, round here," he said. Cole didn't answer right away. He took a slow sip from his glass before replying. "Just passing through." "That so?" The barkeep nodded, unconvinced. "Don't get too comfortable, stranger. Red Hollow don't take kindly to drifters. Sheriff's been nervous since word came there's an outlaw in the hills." Cole's jaw tightened slightly. "I'll be gone before he has time to worry." The barkeep shrugged and moved on. Cole let the conversation die there, his mind already drifting back to the night before. He could still see her, the girl at the piano. Blind eyes open, but full of life. Fingers that trembled at first, then flew like wings once the music took her. There was something about her that didn't fit this place. She didn't belong among the mockery and smoke. She was too real, too raw. He glanced toward the corner where she had sat. Her stool was empty now, the piano closed. But on top of it, a small folded cloth lay neatly across the keys. A handkerchief, white, with a delicate embroidered M near one edge. He didn't know what it meant, but he knew it was hers. He took it in his hand, hesitated, then tucked it gently into his coat pocket. Later that afternoon, Ilara returned to the saloon, cane tapping softly across the dusty floor. She always came early to practice before the crowd arrived, when the room was still quiet and she could hear her music without the blur of voices. The barkeep looked up. "You're back early, Miss Ilara." "I like it this way," she said softly. "It's easier to hear the world before people fill it." He chuckled. "You and your music. Ain't never seen someone love sound that much." Ilara smiled faintly, though her fingers brushed against the piano like it was a friend she hadn't seen in years. She lifted the cover and ran her hands across the keys, testing their warmth. But before she began, she stopped. Someone was sitting in the shadows, boots up, hat tipped forward. "Didn't think I'd have company this early," she said quietly. The man lifted his head. His voice was low, roughened by wind and distance. "Didn't think I'd be back here either." Something in the tone made her pause. "You were here last night." "I was. You listened." "I did." There was a silence between them, not empty, but full. Ilara smiled a little, faint but genuine. "Most people don't." Cole leaned back in his chair, watching her fingers hover above the piano. "Most people don't deserve to." The words surprised her. She turned her head toward the sound of his voice. "You talk like someone who's seen too much." He hesitated. "Maybe I have." "Then maybe you understand music," she said. "It's made of all the things people don't say out loud." Cole's gaze softened. "Play, then. Let me hear what you're not saying." So she did. The melody began soft, almost hesitant, then grew with a slow, aching strength. Each note told a story, of nights spent alone, of laughter remembered, of pain that refused to fade. Cole sat unmoving, his hand resting on his gun belt, not out of threat, but habit. Yet as the song went on, his shoulders eased, his hand falling to his lap. When the final note faded, Alara turned her face toward him. "That one was for my father," she said quietly. "He said music was a way to keep from drowning. Did he teach you?" "Yes, before he died." Cole swallowed, the lump in his throat unexpected. "He taught you well." "Thank you, mister?" He hesitated before answering. "Cole." "Just Cole?" "For now." She nodded, smiling slightly. "Then thank you, Cole." He rose from his seat, placing a single silver coin on the piano. "For the song." Alara shook her head. "I don't play for money." "I know," he said. "That's why it's worth something." And before she could answer, he turned and walked out, leaving her with nothing but the sound of the door creaking shut and her heart beating faster than she expected. Over the next few nights, Cole kept returning. At first, he came quietly, sitting in the same shadowed corner, saying little. But the townsfolk noticed. They always noticed. The stranger with the sharp eyes and the gun on his hip didn't belong in Red Hollow any more than the blind girl belonged behind that battered piano. By the third night, whispers had begun. "That man's trouble. Looks like he's running from something. Maybe she's playing for the devil himself." Laura heard the murmurs, but she didn't let them stop her. Cole had become part of her evenings now, his silent presence steady and strange. When she played, she could sense him there, not pitying her, not mocking her, just listening, truly listening. On the fifth night, when the saloon was half full and the air thick with cigar smoke, one of the ranch hands decided to test him. "Hey, stranger," the man slurred, staggering toward Cole's table. "You got a thing for blind songbirds, huh?" Cole didn't move. "Walk away." The man laughed, spitting on the floor. "Oh, you're one of them heroes? Ain't no hero can fix what's broke." Cole's voice dropped low. "Last chance." But the drunk kept talking, louder now, turning toward Alara. "Hey, sweetheart, you know your piano friend here? He's—" The sound of wood splintering cut him off. Cole's chair scraped back, his fist connecting hard with the man's jaw. The ranch hand hit the floor, blood on his lip, shock in his eyes. The saloon froze. Cole stared down at him, voice quiet but full of warning. "You got no right to talk about her." No one moved. No one dared. Then Alara's voice broke the silence, calm but trembling. "Please, don't fight because of me." Cole looked up, his anger softening as he saw her face. Blind, but filled with worry. He exhaled slowly, then turned away. "Sorry," he muttered, and sat down again. The barkeep cleared his throat, trying to ease the tension. "How about another song, Miss Alara?" She nodded, her fingers shaking slightly as she found her place on the keys. This time, she didn't play for the crowd, she played for him. The music was quieter, warmer, full of apology and gratitude. Cole listened, every note pulling something loose inside him, something he thought he'd buried years ago. When she finished, he whispered, "You got a way of making a man remember what it feels like to be decent." Alara smiled faintly. "Then I'm glad you listen." As the nights passed, Red Hollow began to change. Not the town itself, but its rhythm. The drunks still came, the cards still turned, but something about the saloon felt different now. When Alara played, people actually listened. When Cole sat beside her, no one dared mock her anymore. It was as if the outlaw's silence demanded respect, and his presence wrapped her in protection she never asked for but quietly welcomed. He never told her who he truly was, never spoke of the lawmen hunting his name, the blood he'd spilled, the mistakes that still woke him in the dark. Around her, he felt no need to lie, only to listen. Sometimes, after the crowd left, he stayed behind to help her close up. He'd walk her home through the empty streets, the sound of crickets filling the spaces where words might have been. One night, as they reached her cabin, she paused by the door. "You don't talk much," she said softly. "Don't have much good to say," he answered. "I don't believe that." "Why not?" "Because the way you listen says otherwise." He looked at her then, really looked. The lamplight through her window framed her face in gold, Her eyes, though sightless, seemed to hold the whole night inside them. He wanted to tell her everything, who he was, what he'd done, but he couldn't, not yet. Instead, he said, "Good night, Alara." She smiled. "Good night, Cole." He turned and walked into the darkness, heart heavier than before. Days turned into weeks. The bond between them grew like a secret kept by the stars. They never touched, not once, but the space between them pulsed with something wordless and powerful. Then came the morning when Cole saw it, a new poster nailed to the sheriff's board outside the general store. Wanted, Cole Avery, dead or alive. Reward, $500. His stomach turned. The ink was fresh. The law was close. He stood there a long time, staring at his own name, until he felt a shadow fall beside him. Sheriff Tomlin, tall and broad, gave him a look that lingered too long. "You new in town, mister?" Cole nodded. "Just a drifter." Tomlin's eyes narrowed. "You got a name?" "Cole." "Cole what?" "Just Cole." The sheriff grunted, unsatisfied. "Well, Cole, you mind yourself. There's a dangerous man ridin' these parts. Goes by the same name. If you see him, best stay clear." Cole tipped his hat, voice calm. "I'll do that." He walked away, but his pulse thundered in his ears. That night, as Alara began her set, he sat in the shadows again, quieter than usual. She noticed. She always did. "You sound troubled," she said gently between songs. "Just tired." "You're lying," she said. "Your silence has edges tonight." He almost smiled. "You see too much for someone who can't see at all. Maybe that's why," she replied. He exhaled. "Alara, if one day I had to leave, would you remember me?" She paused, her hands resting on the keys. "If you leave, I'll remember the sound of your silence, and that's enough." He looked at her for a long moment, the music of her words striking deeper than any bullet could, and in that moment, he knew he couldn't keep hiding forever. But not tonight. Tonight he would stay. Tonight he would listen. And as she began to play once more, the world outside seemed to fade away. The law, the fear, the ghosts, until there was only her music and the outlaw who finally felt something like peace. Morning came with the taste of dust and danger. The sun crawled over the dry horizon, spilling light across the cracked earth, painting Red Hollow in the faded colors of survival. The town was waking up slow, wagons rattling past, the blacksmith's hammer ringing in the distance, and the faint whistle of the wind carrying the scent of desert sage. Cole Avery sat by the river on the edge of town, boots planted in the mud, hat resting on his knee. The water was shallow, its surface catching the gold of dawn. He hadn't slept. Sleep never came easy to a man who'd lived too long with ghosts. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the same scene. A young man with trembling hands, a gun that went off too fast, a body falling. He rubbed his jaw and looked toward the horizon. Somewhere out there, the law was riding closer. He could feel it, like a shadow crawling beneath the sunlight. He didn't know how much longer he could stay. But when he thought of leaving, he saw her face. Alara. The girl with sightless eyes and music brighter than any dawn. The one who played not because she had hope, but because her songs were the only way she could breathe. He cursed under his breath, pulled his hat back on, and rose to his feet. He had no right to be near her. He was poison, his name alone enough to stain anyone who cared for him. But every time he tried to stay away, he found himself walking back toward the golden spur, drawn to that old piano like a moth to fire. By midday, the saloon was quieter than usual. The barkeep nodded when he saw Cole enter. "Back again, huh? Ain't you got somewhere better to be?" "Not yet," Cole said, setting a few coins on the counter. The man chuckled. "You drink like someone who's hiding something." Cole's eyes flicked up, cold and sharp. "Then maybe you should stop asking questions." That ended the conversation. From the corner of the room came the sound he'd been waiting for. Alara's footsteps, steady and careful, the soft tap of her cane announcing her presence. She paused just inside the doorway, her face turned slightly toward the sound of voices. "Good afternoon, Cole." He smiled faintly. You knew I was here. I can always tell, she said, moving toward the piano. You make the air heavy when you're thinking too hard. He huffed a quiet laugh. You make it lighter when you play. She sat down, smoothing her skirt before touching the keys. Then we balance each other, don't we? Maybe we do. She began to play, fingers gliding effortlessly, her body swaying with the rhythm. The melody was soft, but carried an ache deep enough to draw silence from the room. Men who'd come for whiskey found themselves listening instead, their glasses forgotten. Cole leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching her. There was a calm in her movements that defied everything cruel about this world. He'd spent years surrounded by the sound of gunfire, screams, the weight of guilt. But her music made all of that fade. When the last note fell, she turned her face toward him. You're quiet today. He hesitated, just thinking. About what? He looked down. What happens when the law catches up? Her hands froze above the keys. The law. He almost regretted saying it. He hadn't meant to, but there it was, out in the open, between them. I ain't the man you think I am, Alara, he said softly. Not a good one anyway. She tilted her head, her blind eyes searching his voice. I never thought you were good or bad, just human. He stared at her, unsure how to answer. No one had ever said that to him before. People saw him as a killer, an outlaw, a name on a poster. But she saw the man behind the shadow. Why do you come here, Cole? She asked gently. You don't belong to this place. I don't belong anywhere, he said. She smiled faintly. Then maybe that's why you understand my music, because I don't either. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was full, like a breath shared between two people who didn't need to speak to understand each other. Cole stepped closer to her, his boots quiet on the wooden floor. You ever think about Levin, this town? Every day, she said softly. But it's hard to run when you can't see where you're going. He swallowed hard. You'd be surprised how far you can get when you stop looking. Back, she smiled again, turning her face toward him. Maybe someday, when I find someone brave enough to take my hand. The words caught him off guard. For a moment, he forgot how to breathe. Outside, a door slammed. The barkeep looked up as a figure entered, a tall man in a brown duster, badge glinting in the light. Sheriff Tomlin. His boots echoed across the floorboards as he approached the counter. Morning, Hank, he said to the barkeep. Heard a stranger's been hanging around here lately. Hank's eyes flicked nervously toward Cole. Maybe one or two. Tomlin's gaze followed. His hand rested casually near his holster. You new here, friend? Cole's tone stayed calm. Just passing through. Name? Cole. The sheriff's eyes narrowed slightly. Cole what? Just Cole. Tomlin studied him for a long moment, then nodded. You look familiar. People say that a lot. Uh-huh. The sheriff turned slightly. Well, if you're staying in Red Hollow, best keep your nose clean. We don't take kindly to troublemakers. I ain't looking for trouble. Good. Tomlin tipped his hat and left, the door swinging shut behind him. Only when he was gone did Alara speak. That man, his voice. It made the room colder. Cole exhaled. That's the law for you. Is he after you? He didn't answer. She didn't need him to. She already knew. That evening, the sky burned orange as the sun sank behind the hills. Cole walked Alara home again, the air quiet, except for the crunch of their boots on the dirt road. Sheriff's suspicious, he said after a while. If he finds out who I am, I'll have to ride. Alara's grip tightened slightly on her cane. You'll leave. He hesitated. If I stay, I'll bring danger to you. You already have, she said softly, but there was no fear in her tone, only sadness. He looked at her, his chest heavy. Then why aren't you afraid? Because, she whispered, for the first time in a long while, I don't feel alone. The words hit him harder than any bullet. When they reached her cabin, the porch lamp flickered in the wind. She turned to face him, her eyes glimmering with faint reflection from the flame. Will you play with me again tomorrow? He hesitated, fighting the instinct to turn away. If I can, then I'll wait. He nodded once, tipping his hat before stepping back into the night. But as he walked away, he already knew. He'd come back. No law, no bounty, no fear could keep him away from her music. Days passed. Each one carried the same rhythm. Her playing, his listening, their quiet walks through the twilight. Yet, beneath the peace, the tension grew. Cole saw more strangers in town. Men with worn saddles and hungry eyes. Bounty hunters. He knew the type. One afternoon, while the saloon was empty, he sat beside her at the piano for the first time. She smiled when she heard him sit down. "You finally decided to play?" "I ain't much for music," he said. "Then it's time you learned." She took his hand and placed it on the keys. Her fingers brushed against his. Soft, cool, sure. The touch sent a jolt through him, a warmth that startled him more than any fight ever had. "Start here," she whispered. "Follow my hand." He pressed a note, low and uncertain. She followed with another, higher and light. Slowly, the two sounds began to weave together. He laughed quietly under his breath. "Don't sound half bad." "It's not about sound," she said. "It's about what you feel between the notes." He looked at her, at the faint smile curving her lips, the peace that seemed to live beneath her skin. "You always talk like that?" "Only when someone's listening." He didn't realize he was smiling until she did too. For a few minutes, they played together, his rough, uneven chords mixing with her graceful melody. The song wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. And for a moment, Cole forgot everything, the bounty, the law, the blood. When the song ended, she turned toward him. "See, you can make beauty out of broken things." He swallowed hard. "You make it sound easy. It isn't, but it's worth it." He wanted to tell her then that she'd done the same for him, but the words caught in his throat. Instead, he stood, tipping his hat low to hide the emotion in his eyes. "Thank you, Ilara." "For what?" "For reminding me what peace sounds like." That night, as the saloon closed and the lamps dimmed, two strangers rode into town. They stopped by the sheriff's office, voices low, urgent. Cole watched from the shadows across the street, his jaw set. He recognized one of them, the same bounty hunter who'd chased him through Arizona months before. He knew then that his time was running out. He turned toward the saloon one last time. Through the window, he saw Ilara sitting at the piano, alone, her fingers moving slowly over the keys. She was playing their song, the one they'd made together. The sound carried through the night, fragile and beautiful. Cole's chest ached. He wanted to walk in, to sit beside her, to let the world fall away again. But he couldn't. If the law found him here, she'd be caught in the fire. He turned to leave, then stopped. He couldn't walk away without saying goodbye. He stepped inside quietly, the door creaking just enough to make her pause mid-song. "Cole, it's me. I thought you'd gone." "Not yet." She smiled faintly. "I was playing your part. I heard." He walked closer, each step slow, deliberate. "Ilara, there's something I need to tell you." Her hands rested still on the piano. "I know." "No, you don't." "Yes, I do," she whispered. "You're leaving." He nodded, though she couldn't see. "The law's here. I can't stay." Her lips trembled. "Then let me play one last song for you." He hesitated, then sat beside her. She began to play, not slow this time, but fierce, desperate, every note a heartbeat. He closed his eyes, letting the sound fill him until he couldn't tell if the ache in his chest was sorrow or salvation. When it ended, she whispered, "Come back when the wind changes, Cole, promise me." He stood, his throat burning. "If I can." "Then I'll wait," she said softly, the same words as before. He turned, opened the door, and stepped into the night. The rain had started again, soft and cold. He walked toward his horse, every step heavier than the last. Behind him, through the window, the piano played on, her song chasing him into the darkness. And somewhere inside him, a vow formed, silent but unbreakable. He would come back, no matter what the world took from him. He would find his way back to the girl who taught him to listen. The wind rose over Red Hollow before sunrise, dragging dust across the empty streets like ghosts in the dawn. The storm that had been brewing for days was finally coming, a wall of gray on the horizon that promised thunder and change. Sheriff Tomlin stood on the boardwalk outside his office, chewing a piece of tobacco and watching the sky. The bounty hunters he'd been expecting arrived just as the first rumble echoed through the hills. 3 men on tired horses, their faces hard and silent. "You boys sure it's him?" Tomlin asked. The tallest of them, a lean man with a scar under his eye, nodded. "Avery. Cole Avery. We tracked him from Tucson to here. He's hiding in your town." Tomlin spit into the dirt. "If that's true, I don't want a shootout in my streets." "You won't have one if he gives up," the bounty hunter replied. "But a man like that don't surrender easy." Tomlin's gaze drifted toward the saloon at the end of the street. He'd seen the stranger there every night for weeks. Quiet, polite, but with danger in his eyes. A man who carried his past like a shadow. He sighed. "I'll handle it." That same morning, Ilara woke to the sound of rain tapping on her window. The air felt heavy, the kind that made every sound sharper. She dressed slowly, running her fingers along the edge of her table until she found her shawl. Her hands were shaking. She didn't know why, only that something felt wrong. When she reached the Golden Spur, the place was half empty. The barkeep greeted her softly. "Mornin', Miss Ilara. You sure you want to play today? Storm's coming hard." "I always play," she said, smiling faintly. But her smile faltered when she realized Cole wasn't there. He'd never missed a morning since the day they met. She waited, listening to the clock tick behind the bar, listening to the creak of the door that didn't open. She began to play anyway. The notes were low and wandering, searching for something that wasn't there. The melody filled the saloon with quiet sorrow, the kind that made even the roughest men forget their drinks for a while. And outside, in the rain, Cole Avery watched through the window. He hadn't meant to come back. Not today, not with the bounty hunters so close. But he couldn't stay away. Not while she was still inside, waiting, not knowing the noose tightening around them both. He stepped into the shadows between 2 buildings, watching the sheriff cross the street toward the saloon. The sight of the badge made his stomach twist. He had one choice left: run, or face what he'd spent years running from. He touched the pistol at his hip, then the pocket where her handkerchief rested, still folded neat from the first night he'd found it. He'd carried it through storms, through deserts, through guilt. It reminded him that someone once saw him as more than a criminal. The thunder cracked above, shaking the sky. He made his choice. He stepped out into the street. Inside the saloon, the door slammed open. Wind and rain burst through, scattering papers and blowing out half the lamps. Ilara stopped playing, startled. Cole stood in the doorway, soaked to the bone, eyes blazing. The entire room went silent. "Cole," she whispered. He walked toward her, every step echoing like a drumbeat. "I came to say goodbye." Her voice broke. "You said that before. This time I mean it." She rose slowly from her seat, her hand brushing the piano for balance. "You think leaving will save me?" "It'll keep you safe when they come," he said. "And they're coming now." As if on cue, boots thundered outside. The sheriff's voice rang out. "Cole Avery, step outside and lay down your gun." Gasps filled the room. Ilara turned her head toward the door, trembling. "Cole, what's happening?" He didn't answer. He took her hand instead, pressing it against his chest. "Feel that?" he said. "That's the first heartbeat I've trusted in years. And it's because of you." Tears welled in her eyes. "Then don't throw it away." He smiled sadly. "A man like me don't get to keep miracles." The sheriff's voice shouted again, sharper this time. "You got 10 seconds, Avery!" Cole's grip tightened around her fingers. "Play, Ilara. No matter what happens. Play our song." She shook her head in fear. "I can't." "Yes, you can. You always could." He turned away and drew his gun, stepping into the open doorway. The street was a blur of rain and lightning. The bounty hunters waited behind barrels, rifles raised. The sheriff stood at the center, hat dripping. Cole raised his hands. "You don't want this fight, Tomlin." "I want justice," the sheriff replied. Cole's voice carried through the rain. "There's been enough blood for one lifetime." Behind him, the piano began to play. Ilara's trembling hands found the melody they had shared, the one born from their first duet. The notes cut through the storm, soft at first, then rising, echoing down the street. The lawmen hesitated, even the horses stilled. Cole stood unmoving, his gun lowered, his body framed in the doorway's light. Every note she played wrapped around him like a prayer. He could feel her there, even without turning. The bounty hunter with the scar spat into the mud. She's trying to distract us. He lifted his rifle. The shot split the air. The piano fell silent for half a heartbeat, then continued, faltering, but alive. Cole stumbled back into the saloon, his hand pressed against his side, blood dark against his shirt. "Cole!" Alara cried, rushing toward the sound of his footsteps. "Cole, no!" He caught her before she fell, holding her tightly. His breath came ragged. "I told you, play." Her tears fell hot against his hand. "Please, stay with me." "I ain't going nowhere," he whispered, forcing a smile. "Just listen." She turned back to the piano, fingers trembling. The melody came again, shakier now but fierce, fighting through the storm. Outside, the sheriff shouted for a ceasefire. The gunmen hesitated, lowering their rifles as the haunting song drifted into the rain. Inside, Cole sank to his knees beside the piano, his hand reaching up to touch its edge. "You keep playing, Alara," he murmured. "Don't you stop." Her music grew louder, filling every corner of the saloon, spilling out into the street. It wasn't perfect. It broke, it cracked, but it was alive. It was forgiveness in sound. When she finished, the room was silent. Only the rain answered her. Cole's head rested against the floorboards, eyes half open. The sheriff stepped in, hat in hand, face pale. "He's still breathing," he said softly. "Get Doc Miller." Alara knelt beside him, holding his hand to her chest. "You said you wouldn't go." He forced a faint laugh. "Didn't say I wouldn't bleed a little." The sheriff crouched beside them. "Miss, this man's got a choice to make. He can stand trial, or he can keep running. But he ain't running, far with that wound." Alara turned her face toward the sheriff's voice. "If you ever heard what I just played, you'd know he's not the man you're hunting anymore." Tomlin looked at Cole for a long moment, the sound of rain softening around them. Then he sighed. "Maybe you're right." He stood, motioning to his men. "Get out of here! All of you! Leave him be!" The bounty hunters hesitated, but the sheriff's tone left no room for argument. They mounted their horses and disappeared into the storm. When they were gone, the sheriff tipped his hat to Alara. "You best take him home, miss. Storm's getting worse." She nodded, tears streaking down her cheeks. "Thank you." Tomlin paused at the door. "That song of yours. You keep playing it. Folks'll remember." Then he left, leaving the saloon empty except for the sound of rain and the faint rasp of Cole's breathing. Alara bent over him, her voice trembling. "Can you walk?" "With help," he said weakly. She wrapped his arm around her shoulders and led him through the rain, step by slow step, toward her cabin. The storm roared, lightning splitting the sky, but she didn't stop. Not until they were inside, soaked and shaking, she laid him on her bed, pressing a towel to his wound. He winced but smiled faintly. "You really did play." "You told me to." He reached for her hand. "You saved me." She shook her head. "No, Cole. You saved yourself the moment you stopped running." He closed his eyes, a small smile on his lips. "Reckon I did." Outside, the thunder began to fade, the storm breaking apart over the hills. The rain softened to a whisper. Alara sat beside him, holding his hand until his breathing steadied. When she was sure he'd fallen asleep, she turned toward the piano in the corner of the room, her old travel keyboard that her father once tuned by ear. She touched the keys gently, the way she'd once touched his face, memorizing every line. She began to play again, softly, for him, for herself, for the storm that had finally passed. The melody rose and fell like a heartbeat, steady, enduring. And in the stillness that followed, Red Hollow listened. For the first time, no one mocked the blind girl who played piano. They listened, they remembered, and somewhere in the quiet between the notes, Cole Avery's heart kept time. The storm that nearly drowned Red Hollow had passed, leaving behind a silence that felt like the world was holding its breath. The air was clean for once, washed of dust and sin, and the earth smelled of renewal. The streets were empty, save for puddles reflecting the slow dawn. Inside a small cabin, at the edge of town, the blind girl's hands never left the man's side. Lara sat by the bed, her fingers resting lightly against Cole's wrist, counting the faint rhythm of his pulse. For 2 days and 2 nights, she barely moved, except to change the bandage or give him water. He had survived the bullet, though the fever that followed nearly took him. The doctor had come and gone, muttering that the outlaw's will to live was stronger than the wound itself. But Ilara knew the truth. He wasn't surviving because of will. He was surviving because of music. Because each time his breathing faltered, she played. Day and night, her piano filled the small cabin, soft hymns, lullabies, the melody of the storm, the song they had made together. She didn't care if the notes were broken or if her voice trembled as she hummed along. Each sound was a thread, pulling him back from the edge. On the morning of the 3rd day, Cole stirred. His eyelids twitched, his fingers moved, and his voice, dry, rough, but alive, broke the silence. "You never stop playing, do you?" Ilara froze, then laughed through tears. "You came back from the dead just to tease me?" He smiled faintly. "Seemed like the only way to make you rest." She reached for his hand, gripping it tightly. "Don't you ever scare me like that again." "I'll do my best," he whispered, eyes meeting her blind gaze. "Though trouble's got a way of following me." "Then let it follow you here," she said. "I'll play loud enough to drown it out." He chuckled softly, the sound weak but warm. "You really think a song can keep a man like me safe?" "I don't think," she replied. "I know." For a while they sat in quiet peace. The rain outside had turned into the soft drip of water from the eaves, and sunlight crept through the window, washing his face in gold. "Sheriff came by yesterday," she said after a while. "Said the bounty hunters left town. Said you're free." Cole blinked slowly, the words sinking in. "Free?" "He told them you were gone," she continued. "That the outlaw they were looking for died in the storm." A long silence followed. Cole stared at the ceiling, his jaw tightening. "Guess that makes me a ghost now." Ilara smiled faintly. "Then haunt me kindly." He looked at her and, for the first time in years, laughed. A real laugh, hoarse, surprised, full of disbelief. "You got away with words, Ilara Mayfield." "And you got away with finding trouble," she said, teasing back. They stayed like that until the sunlight filled the room completely. For the first time since he'd come to Red Hollow, Cole felt something he'd forgotten long ago. Peace that didn't feel borrowed. Over the next few weeks, life in Red Hollow began to shift. The saloon reopened, though it no longer echoed with the cruel laughter it once had. The sheriff ordered new rules: no mockery, no fighting, and respect for anyone who had courage enough to play a song worth listening to. Every evening, as the sky burned red over the desert, the piano in the Golden Spur sang again. Ilara sat at her place in the corner, her fingers steady, her smile unshaken. But she was not alone anymore. Cole was there. Not the outlaw anymore, not the fugitive hiding in the dark. He wore a clean shirt, his hat tilted low, his gun belt left behind. He sat near the piano, tuning it, fixing the broken keys, making sure every note rang true. The first night she played again, the saloon filled beyond its walls. Ranchers, drifters, even the sheriff. They came to listen. Her opening song was slow and heavy, the kind that made hearts ache. Then Cole joined her, playing the lower chords just like he had the first time. The room went still, and when the melody rose, there were tears in the eyes of men who hadn't cried in 20 years. When they finished, silence followed. Then applause. Not raucous or wild, but genuine, thunderous, grateful. Cole leaned close and whispered, "They ain't laughing anymore." Ilara smiled through tears. "They finally hear it." After the crowd dispersed, she turned to him. "Do you ever think about leaving?" He looked at her, the lines on his face soft in the lamplight. "Used to. Not anymore." "Why?" Because runnin' don't make a man free. Standin' still what the right person does. Her breath caught. You mean me? He grinned. Ain't no one else plays piano like you, she laughed, swatting his arm gently. Flattery won't get you out of tuning the strings tomorrow. I'll take that punishment. And so the days became weeks. The weeks turned to months. Red Hollow began to forget its ghosts, and Cole Avery became part of its stories. The quiet man who worked the land, fixed pianos, and spent his nights beside the blind girl whose music changed the town. One evening, the sheriff found him sitting outside the saloon, smoking under the fading sun. Never thought I'd see you living quiet, Tomlin said, stepping up beside him. Cole smiled faintly. Never thought I'd see a sheriff letting a dead man stay free. Tomlin chuckled. You earned it. Ain't often a man can stop a gunfight with a piano. Wasn't me who stopped it, Cole said. It was her. Tomlin nodded. Maybe so, but you gave her a reason to keep playing. They sat in silence for a moment, watching the light fade. You stay in Red Hollow for good? The sheriff asked. Cole flicked the ash from his cigarette. If she'll have me, then maybe this town's finally got something worth protecting, Tomlin said. Cole smiled. Maybe it does. When the sheriff left, Cole leaned back in his chair, staring up at the stars. He hadn't realized how bright they could be when a man finally stopped running. Months later, Red Hollow came alive with its first spring festival in years. The dusty square was strung with lanterns, music, and laughter that no longer carried cruelty. People danced, children ran between wagons, and the air smelled of roasted corn and flowers from the hills. At the center of it all stood a small wooden stage, and on it, the piano that had once been mocked now stood polished and whole. Ilera sat before it, dressed in a simple white dress that fluttered in the breeze. Cole stood behind her, one hand resting gently on her shoulder. The crowd quieted as she lifted her hands. This song, she said softly, is for those who think they've been forgotten, for the broken things that can still make music, and for the man who showed me how to be heard. Cole swallowed hard, his chest tightening. She began to play. The melody was different now, brighter, freer, full of life. It danced through the air, weaving between the lanterns and stars. Children clapped along, couples held hands, and even the sheriff tapped his boot against the dust. When she finished, the crowd erupted in cheers that rolled like thunder through the town. Cole stepped forward, taking her hand as the sound washed over them. Mind if I play the left hand again? He whispered. Her smile was radiant. I was waiting for you to ask. He sat beside her, his rough fingers brushing hers, and together they played not a sad tune, not one of loss or regret, but a song of beginning. The music rose, swelling with joy and warmth, filling the night until even the wind seemed to carry it beyond the edges of town. When the final note faded, the crowd stood in silence. Then applause roared again, echoing down the streets and out into the hills. Ilera turned to him, her blind eyes glimmering with tears. You did come back. I told you I would, he said softly. Do you think it's over now? He shook his head, smiling. No, I think it's just startin'. She laughed quietly, resting her head against his shoulder. The sheriff raised his hat in salute. The crowd began to sing the melody they'd just heard, voices blending with the last notes of the piano. Red Hollow was no longer a place of mockery. It had become a place of memory, of healing, of music that could mend even the hardest hearts. As the lanterns flickered and the stars brightened, Cole looked down at Ilera, her hand resting in his, her smile steady and full of life. He whispered, You taught me to see, even when I didn't deserve it. She lifted her face toward him, her voice soft as the wind. And you taught me that the world still listens when you play the truth. He kissed her forehead gently, holding her close as the piano gleamed under the lantern light. The town's laughter drifted into the distance, pure and kind. The old ghosts were gone. And as the last song of the night began, Red Hollow breathed again. The blind girl played her piano, the outlaw played beside her, and together they wrote the sound of forever. In a land where dust and sorrow once ruled, a blind girl's music became the light that tamed the darkness. And a man once called an outlaw found his redemption not through bullets, but through love. Her melody taught a broken heart to see, and together they turned the silence of Red Hollow into a song the West would never forget. Because sometimes the wildest hearts find peace not in running, but in finally being heard. If you enjoyed this tale of love, redemption, and the music that healed two lost souls, don't forget to subscribe to Wild West Love Chronicles. Join our growing campfire of dreamers, and never miss another heart-stirring story from the untamed frontier, where every tale begins with a spark and ends with forever.